what about we get together again and bring some friends, and then we can talk at length about Ruined King, because then the game will have been out for a little while, so we won't be spoiling anything for chat who wants to like play it. Let's say I'll bring Joe Mad, creative director of Airship, Syndicate, and of Ruined King. So Joe and I will come, and if you want to gather up the lore guardians, and we can do a round table, and we can just talk at length about all the things about Ruined King. How does that sound?
Well, it sounds to me like the good old lore crew from the courtroom might return. So, we were called to action the last time we were here, and we have all assembled the star team that everyone's been looking for. So, besides the 3 people, which people on this channel may already know about, we also have with us Rowan, whom you may know as Riot Latency, who is the creative director at Riot Forge, and we have also Joe Mad, who is the creative director at Airship Syndicate, which are pretty much the 2 people that everyone is gonna praise, because, let's be honest, I don't want to say no one expected it, because people did expect it, but when Ruined King dropped, that game is pretty good. Let me just say that you guys have a pretty big success on your hands, especially since this was technically the first Riot Forge release. I'm not sure if you count. I'm not sure if Hextech was dropped before Ruined King, but for the first release that you guys have, this is such an amazing game. So today we will probably spend an hour praising your game.
And I think you've got to give full props to Joe and the team at Airship. Like, you know, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. Like, we couldn't have done it without all of the people at Airship. It's Joe and I are here talking, but there's a lot of other people that made it happen.
Yes, I will channel their magic energy and share all your thanks and praise with them, because they really are the ones that made the game, and you know, they're big fans of League, so that made it a little easier. But yeah, thank you.
Joe's not even joking either. Like, the number of times we went and visited, and they just play ARAMs at lunchtime, and the number of times we would jump in and be like, "Do you want to play ARAM at lunch?" We're like, well, we need to finish this meeting, but yeah, I'm in for ARAMs after we're done with the meeting.
They still do, by the way.
Yeah,
day.
I mean, of course they're still playing ARAMs. Do we ever really stop?
So can you actually give us the story of how you decided to go for Airship Syndicate?
So we played Battle Chasers Night War, and that game was amazing. And some of the artists in particular as well from Airship are actually worked with me on some stuff for game modes at Riot as well in the past. And then I'm not sure exactly how we reached out first, Joe. Maybe like Leanne reached out initially.
Yeah, we actually were in the process of actually pitching the second Battle Chasers game, and someone from Riot met with us at I think it was like GDC or E3 or something. It was like
something. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, hey, we love Battle Chasers. How would you like to make an RPG, a League of Legends RPG? And we're like, okay. And it just seemed like so far-fetched that this tiny studio in Austin would do that, because at that time, I mean, we were like still very small. And we basically were like, even if we wanted to, we were already in talks with other people, and it just didn't seem like a deal could come together that fast. And
it almost didn't happen.
Yeah, and like they really turned everything around like lightning quick. And then we knew like, oh crap, I think they're serious. I'm allowed to cuss now, right? I'm just kidding. And so yeah, and then we just started. It was like very fast once we all agreed, like, yeah, let's do this.
It felt more like it was like not us having to convince Joe and the Airship team if they wanted to work on it, but to convince them that we weren't trolling and that we were like no, yeah, we love Battle Chasers. We have, you know, people that have read like the original Battle Chasers comics. We love, you know, the game. No, we want to make a League of Legends RPG with you guys. And then I think once they realized we weren't trolling and we were serious.
Exactly.
A question that would follow up on that. Has being not acquired, but being or teaming up with Riot Forge, has that massively changed the way that you decided to, or that you developed Ruined King, if you compare it to Battle Chasers? Or rather, like, how massive was the change, like, now that you realize that, like, Riot Forge is now looking over you?
It was only more challenging in that, I mean, Battle Chasers, we own the IP, so we literally could do whatever we want with it. And it's not an IP that's as, beloved across the world as League of Legends, where everyone has very passionate opinions and, favorite characters and stuff like that. So we had to, like, not piss off the fans.
Very diplomatic.
Yeah, we had to, like, work with Forge, who really were instrumental in, like, guiding us and, like, yes, it would make sense to do that. No, I mean, it required a lot of homework on my part at the very beginning, because I was not familiar with there's like over 150 champs, so we knew we were gonna maybe do like 6 maximum playable, so it's like, how on earth do we narrow that down, which hopefully we can talk about in a little bit. But yeah, it was definitely, when you're working with somebody else's IP, like, there's just a lot more complexity that goes into it, and every part of this game, it really is not a reskin of Battle Chasers. Every part of it is an evolution of what we did before, and there's just way more story and more character interaction, and so it was way more challenging than we thought it was going to be at the very beginning, where it was like, oh, it'll be just like Battle Chasers, but with League characters. No, that's not the game we ended up making. So, I hope people give it a try.
So before we gonna go into the free talk, we need to brush off 2 really big questions, which are absolutely at the top of my priority list. When it comes to Viego, we've known that the Ruined King game has been in development even before Viego was ever teased. And the biggest thing that people around Viego really praised is the fact that his design was totally different than what people expected. Everyone was expecting a big, grumpy guy from an unknown land, but instead, we got something that totally just blew our expectations away. So, how did you arrive at Viego being a young king instead of some bearded wise man?
I mean, when we first started exploring it, we did do a bunch of explorations that were grumpy old men and, like, weird creatures, and, like, I think Rowan was sort of the one that was like, hey, try like a hot young dude, and we're like, okay.
Some of those original concepts as well, they're in the art book, but I think we posted some of them as well. This might be where Necrit does a panning of the some of the other versions, but the thing that I really liked about your initial sketches as well, Joe, is you can see inside them some of the iconic pieces which we eventually carried over into the final Viego, like the hole in his chest with the black mist leaking out of it. That was like, as soon as we saw that, we're like, oh, that's cool, like that makes sense. We've got to take that all the way through to like the final design.
Yeah, that was I think that was one of our concept artists, Baldi Conine. I'm sure he did like the hole in the chest one, and then we're like, with each one, it's like, ooh, we're keeping that. Ooh, the crown is awesome. We're gonna keep that. And I think I did a version where his sword was like a giant like tombstone with his life engraved on it.
It was so bad. It's the most metal thing ever. His sword was the coffin lid of his dead wife's coffin with a hilt shoved in it, and I was like, all right, that's actually pretty badass. Okay, but we couldn't end up using it. But
yeah, there's a lot of stuff that didn't happen, but
yeah.
But eventually, it sort of like trickled down, and we're all like, yes, we like this one.
It made sense not just visually, but like thematically, because, like you're saying, Necrit, we wanted to sort of assert player expectations, but also it fit with his character because it's a tragic love story, and it made more sense that a younger man than an older man would, this isn't the love of a 50-year-old king. This is a petulant, young, fiery 22-year-old, and his first love with his queen. Like, that just felt a lot more believable, that kind of like tragic love and relationship would be like a 22-year-old than like a 50. Yeah.
Yeah, we literally had a version where the cutout in his chest was in the shape of a heart. It was this little empty
Like a
heart hole.
like a little
like very literal.
Yeah. And then someone made a meme. They just put the emoji in there in Slack and posted that.
And then we knew like once we had like the idea that like, you know, she stabbed him in the chest. Spoiler. And that was like in the opening cutscene. It was such a powerful moment. So it all just like kind of like worked together.
So that opening cutscene it's funny because you remember, Joe, we made that cutscene in like early 2019. But the work that we did to establish the environment for the sanctuary, the waters of life, the exact angle and like the way she stabs him, eventually was used as reference for almost every single other time you see that moment. And because we came first, we had like the lowest level of detail. But after us, you know, they did comics and there was like, you know, novel or novella, and they built more detail and, you know, built more like story into it. So it's kind of strange to have all of that went before us, even though that moment came from us first. And so when we come in afterwards, we are like maybe slightly less accurate or slightly like as perfect as the novel version. But the reason is because we had to make ours like 2.5 years ago, and then they were able to do a lot of that other stuff. You know, other teams could do it in the years since.
So I wanted to ask, since we're touching on the production history of Viego, it might be worth bringing up, I mean, the probably slightly sore subject of the massive delay that the game had to undergo. Because I feel like a lot of people aren't really clear about why that happened outside of, like, obviously pandemic, which, you know, pretty good excuse to delay anything. But then I know that Airship Syndicate is a Texas studio as well, and you were hit by the massive power grid outage that happened in the winter.
You guys got like triple whammy in December last year.
That was the worst. Like I've realized I you know, like how would I do in a post-apocalyptic future? After like 1 week without water and power, I realized I wouldn't make it very long. It was pretty bad. But I mean, those delays, yes, COVID was definitely a thing. We all had to work remotely for over a year. That took some getting used to, obviously, where we can't be together every day. So I think that slowed everyone down. But honestly, too, I think as we got toward the tail end of the game and we were playing it, we all just felt like it needed a little more time. It just was not great yet. And luckily, Ford was cool with, you know, giving us the time to. A lot of the things people really point out that they loved in the game, like the character interactions, the amount of them, all the little lore that was added, like the liveliness of Bilgewater, all that stuff was not in there. So if we had not delayed it, I don't think that it would have gotten the reception that it did. So, you know, really, it just needed more time. Game development is like not an exact science. So you can set an end date, but at some point you're going to play it and be like,
like,
it could be better.
Just as an interesting tidbit, can you actually give us an example of like what was added in later?
How much do you want to reveal? I mean, it was a lot.
Yeah. I love these behind the scenes details.
Yeah,
so
we made story changes to like the entire ending of the game that we had to go back into the existing story and like, you know, retrofit stuff into it to make it make sense.
I'd say about 1/3 of the script was like had surgery done on it during like the first quarter of this year. The combat and the design stuff was looked at a lot. Like Pike was kind of like pseudo rebooted only a couple of months before we went to the missions for it. Like the kit was still most of the same, but there was like a bit of a philosophical nudge on him. And then now seeing players play the game and everybody loves Pike in particular in the combat. They're like, Pike does lots of damage. He feels really good. I'm like, okay, good thing we went back and like did stuff. But I agree with Joe. Like, you know, we all played the game and it was a good game, but it wasn't great yet. And you know, no one's going to remember how quickly we got the game done. They're going to remember how good it is when it's out. So we chose to take the time to make it actually great and hopefully everyone thinks so.
I personally, when it comes to Pike, when I first played him, I was so confused. It was just like so much for me to like, so much information that I had to like memorize to be able to do the proper combos. But there's something about the game forcing you to play these characters at certain parts in the story where eventually you do understand how to play them and you're actually surprised at how fun they are. Like at first I was just playing with Ilaoi and Braum and Misfortune, and then by the end of the game I was rocking Pike because I was just like I had so much fun with him. And that there's something I wanted to say regarding Viego. In the trailer, I remember I was sitting with everybody in the chat, and I was just like, "Oh boy, here we go! Like this is going to be that one scene that we've seen over and over again, in like 4 different stories at this point."
Oh, I know what you mean.
And I was so delighted to see how dark it went. It was just, it cleared my skin, it cleansed my soul. Like, it was just so good because you see like the horror on her face, and you see him and the face expressions and the fact that she stabbed and then double stabbed him, like all those tiny touches. That was exactly what lacked, because the story is extremely tragic and it's extremely dark, and the heaviness of it all is what made the Shadow Isles into what it was. So the fact that you actually went with the original story and not like sugar-coated it in some like pretty beautiful Disney way was really, really refreshing and made me extremely happy.
Yeah, and speaking of the cutting room floor, there was actually you actually saw the sword stab him in his chest, and for ratings reasons and stuff, we cleverly hit the angle of the stab. But I have to give props to, not only Riot's cinematic team, but Axis Animation, who worked on that scene, because it, like, even seeing it all throughout development, in the animatic stage and everything, I like got chills. Especially when the music and audio is added in, like chills. I still get chills sometimes when I watch it. And then the scream that sets off the ruination.
The attention to detail that they did on his facial expression as he gets stabbed, because I remember you specifically calling it out, Joe, because he still is like in denial on the way down. Like his face is still like...
He's like, "Oh, she stabbed me, how sweet."
Yeah, like he still hasn't processed it. He hasn't processed it yet. He's like, "No, dude, you just got stabbed by your dead wife," and he's like, "No, it's still good. It's still good." And then we actually, but then we lean into how maybe he is in a bit of denial himself, like later on in the game as well. But to see that represented in like a nice CG on his facial expression was really cool.
Yes.
I will say one thing I'll touch on too, really quickly, is that going dark, like it's like a general rule, the first couple minutes of anything should kind of set the tone for what you're about to see. And like I knew we couldn't really make a game in Bilgewater and the Shadow Isles if it was going to be like for kids, and so that was something we agreed on early on. And I actually think the like early versions of the script had a lot more, like probably pushing it too far into mature territory. But it's also the reason why MF blows Thorn away in the opening scene, because it's like we just wanted people to know, like, this story is going to have some teeth and surprising moments. It is not like sugar-coated, like you said. And so that was something we tried to like keep all the way through to the end of the game.
Have you thought of like making Isolde not as hydrated as she was in the video? Was there like a consideration or a plan before that?
Yeah, Dinker, back when we started it, there was no like established idea of exactly how it went down. So we were, working with like, Joe's vision of how he wanted to like represent the moment. But also I get the feeling that if we had, ghoulified her more, we would have hit the same ratings or censorship problem for certain regions. So it was probably safer in the end that we didn't go that route and we had to hydrate her that much, so that she wasn't like a ghastly corpse that was being lowered into the water, but we still got the message across.
Now, okay, so speaking of Ilawi and everyone surrounding that, the other massive question is, how did you guys arrive at the team that we got? Because, of course, every time something like this is being developed, there are a lot of champions floating in the air. The same thing happened for the Ruination event in League. So, how did you guys arrive at your beloved champions, which we have in the game right now?
Joe, take it away.
Yeah, so I, unlike the majority of the team, was not super familiar with. I've always loved the art on League of Legends, and I follow a lot of the artists, and I have friends at Riot, and so I don't play League, but I just knew of it and loved the art style. I knew there was a lot of awesome champs, but I didn't realize there was so damn many, and so when we started to create the list, I just literally read through all of League of Legends wikis, short stories, everything. It took weeks. I'm sure Rowan was very patient during that time, but
no, I was sending you pages of links.
Yeah,
Read this next, read this next, read this next.
And I was just sometimes it was just a piece of art, like Pike's splash art, where he's underwater with all these dead pirates, and I'm like, what the hell? This guy's awesome. Put him on the list. Ilawi was definitely one of the first ones. I just loved how massive and strong she was, and the idol. She, tests dudes, lives how she wants, whatever. I was like, sweet. And it helped that as we were looking at the locations in Runeterra, we were instantly excited about Bilgewater. And so that kind of made certain characters better than others. It's okay, Ilawi is a shoo-in, so is Pike. MF, gotta have her in there if it's a Bilgewater game. And then in reading the stories, it's ooh, the Burning Tides thing is cool. Ooh, Gangplank killed MF's parents, but Ilawi had a relationship with him. What? And so there were just certain characters that worked together to create immediate tension, and then we knew they couldn't all be from Bilgewater because it's fun experiencing a place from an outsider's perspective, and it gives you reasons for some exposition where it's hey, what's going on here? I'm not familiar with this, and that way we could onboard the player as well. So there was a lot of that. There was combat roles, we need a healer, we need this, and so our list, I think there was probably 40 or 50, and then it was 20, and then it was 12, and then we're ooh, some of them could be villains. We could get Thresh in there. And then that's when we were but who's the big bad? And we're I don't know. And then, Rowan was hey, we've talked about making the Ruin King, the Blade of the Ruin King item. We've talked about making that character a champion. And we were oh, damn, that would be perfect. Because the Shadow Isles is right there. So
the game was being developed even before Viego was considered for a character in the game? Is that the case?
In the MOBA?
No,
yeah.
I mean entirely. Was the Ruined King game already, has it started production without the thought of Viego? Because since you didn't know what villain you would have.
Only in the earliest stages when we were coming up with the
Concepting.
plan. He wasn't a thing yet.
I wouldn't call by the time you get to production in a game, it's mostly in. But yeah, in that early discovery phase, it's very loose and free. And like Joe says, we were throwing around lots of different champions. I remember Joe saying Pike, hell yeah. I remember Pike and Braum in particular. I wasn't convinced on Pike initially, and Joe convinced me on Pike. And I think conversely, Joe, you weren't sold on Braum initially, but I was able to show you the way of the pure of heart.
He's just so cute and
He's exactly what they needed. He's exactly what they needed.
He
They-
does
they- that,
well in the end, yeah.
Yeah. That ended up being the reason why he was perfect. Because I was first of all, humor is hard to write. Oh my gosh, how's he gonna get along with these a murderer and just stoic swordsman? But then it was wait, that's actually perfect because he's the guy everyone else will love, even if he's annoying the team. And so it It really was great. And then, to be honest, there's been that banter between Alawi and Braum, like in the MOBA, where she's like, "Oh, a man that won't break" and all that, and we're like, "Ooh, it'd be so fun to like play with that stuff," you know? Where
I remember you like
a couple times.
I remember you asked us like, "Are you guys cool if we lean into this?" And I was like, "Yes, lean into this." like
I wish we did more, but you know, it's like
I think we elegantly walked the line where
You see,
the message is received.
At the beginning of it, since like in Burning Tides, so we had Olaf. So I was like waiting for Olaf. I expected Olaf, and at first I was just like personally offended that it was Braum and not Olaf. But after playing the game and seeing the dynamic between everyone and the fact that Braum pretty much carried everyone and played therapist like to the T.
That's very
so
true.
like Olaf can't do that. Olaf is not about that. Olaf is about killing. So I fell in love with Braum because he brought out the things in these characters that they would have never been able to express otherwise.
Like my favorite, super quickly, before I let TB talk, super quickly, my favorite interactions are between Yasuo and Braum. Because like,
Yes!
Braum showed that Yasuo is actually kind of an asshole to people. And he's not like the cool swordsman that like everyone loves. He's actually
edgy.
a horrible
He's
guy.
too edgy.
Yeah.
And I love those two. Those two.
Yeah,
are my
and
favorite.
I mean, even like a character like Alawi that is driven by forward motion, she, you know, has moments where she doubts, and like Braum is that dude that you can't like break his spirit. He'll always just push you forward and get you unstuck no matter what. And so, you know, he ended up being perfect. And JB Blanc, who does his voice, is amazing, and every single line he said cracked us up. And yeah, he is the heart of the game for sure.
JB just is Braum. I'm not convinced that it's actually Braum is pretending to be JB. Like, sorry, Sky.
I mean that Braum technically played Vander in Arcane then?
Oh,
He did.
Yeah,
He
I
did.
think so. Yeah.
He is
He
Vander,
did.
yeah.
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 Yeah, but
Yeah,
that is one of the things I quite liked about the inclusion of Braum is that everyone else is on some level like a very serious sort of self-concern, like I care about Yasuo with care about my honor, and Ilawi is like the will of the Buru, and Misfortune with her complex about I have to kill this goddamn gangplank, like I have to kill him, and
She
Ari
could just
with her
let it
hank,
go. If she could
and
just
Pike
let
with
it
his
go.
stabby, and then Braum is like the only one who's like willing to sort of go, okay, well, sit down, have meal, be friends. He is kind of the glue of like
pretty
getting
strong.
the dynamic.
Have you been practicing that? That's pretty
No,
good.
that was a good voice.
I don't know if
That was
Braum is
pretty good.
good.
That was pretty good.
Now, yeah.
Actually, like super quickly, there is a side quest where you look for the little red thingies in one of the shops, and I love how you learn that it is actually the shopkeeper who is like messing with people, like letting the hounds around. And when you go there and you beat the crap out of them, and Braum is like, "Oh, sorry for coming through here," and like while everyone else is literally like chopping people into pieces, Braum is like, I'm sorry," and you know. Braum is a brilliant comedic relief, because I don't know, have you actually like considered another champion instead of Braum to do this role, or was like the comedic relief kind of like naturally dropped in as you accepted Braum?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I think we chose him for that reason at that point.
Yeah.
Because there were a bunch of outsiders, including Jinx and Vi, strangely. They were early on in the list, and
That was really early.
at the
Yeah.
time, people were like, yeah, we're kind of doing something else with them. We can't talk about it, but let's not use them. And I'm like, what is it? So now we know.
So Joe makes a good point. Like some of the process there of like Forge collaborating with Airship is you know, there's obviously things that Airship can't know. It's just not possible. But you know, we can hopefully bring like some color and like opportunities to things. You know, like Yasuo and Ari, knowing, you know, we can move their characters actually forward and unlock them to be able to tell, better stories in the future. Having characters like that trapped in, the same story cycle over on Ionia, but being able to get them out of Ionia and into the world. Now Ari is set to, sorry, spoilers, but is set to, now she can go wherever, the wind takes her, and she can go and like chase, her future somewhere else if she wants to. Yasuo is able to go to Noxus now and can, chase the next step in his journey. There's Dinker. I'm not gonna touch it.
I know.
Like I can't contain myself. Like if we end up with like some sort of like DLC that happens to go to Noxus, like I will absolutely lose it.
I think he said, and I think there was a version where he said the reason why he was going there, or we at least implied it more. But now it's a little more.
We ended up not. I mean, you remember the earlier versions that you had, Joe, where it was going to be like he was going to be in a galley, or like he in the brig in a ship, right? And the camera was going to like pan across, and it was going to be like a Noxian prisoner ship, and it would be like panning across the cells and be like random guy, random guy, and then just Yasuo there with his, and then just Yasuo with his sword, and like the way he chooses to get to Noxus is to let himself get captured in a prisoner ship and then just go to Noxus.
Nice.
Now you're making me wish. Why didn't we do that version? Yeah,
because we ran out of time.
Yeah, we had a version where it was like every champ gets an ending, and then it was kind of like the Return of the King movie ending, where it's like, it's over. I can go to the bathroom. Oh wait, it's not over. Okay, now it's over. Oh wait. And it was like, wow, there's like 6 endings to this game. So we wrapped it all up in like a kind of like cool like tavern toast.
It was good. It was good. I want to touch as well on what Joe mentioned about like edgy characters, and that's why like initially I was really skeptical on Pyke, but Joe and the team like gave us so much confidence that like it was an opportunity to make Pyke not one-dimensional. Because like until Ruined King, Pyke is just like, I'm going to murder people on my list, and that was basically it. It's like I'm being controlled by psychic whales under the ocean, and they're making me murder captain. But like in Ruined King, we were able to like show that there's more to the character and be able to bring other layers to him. And what Joe and like the team did, I think, is moved that character forward now to where he's like, I am worthy, and that like ending that they have after the credits. Is really significant, where for the first time ever he's taking control of his own destiny, and he scratched off the name on the list and wrote whatever he wanted onto the list, and he's never been able to do that before. So I'm really glad that the guys like went with Pyke.
You reminded me of another cutting room floor item where Steve, who was our lead designer and designed the combat, he wanted to give Pyke an ability where he reads the list, and then all your options get overtaken to like murder, and it's like kind of like scratchy, and your only option is to like kill this person that's now on your list. And we didn't end up going that route, but it's still cool.
It would have been cool fourth wall breaking combat.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing with Pyke is that after the last events of Pyke and how he was shown to us, we weren't really happy about that. So the fact that he had so much development, and that we've seen like a completely different side to him when like he go deeper and like longer into the game, and the conversations, which oh my god, just give me like 30 hours worth of just conversations. Like I swear to God,
I am worthy.
Oh my God.
It's funny too how like
talking to them, and he I think it was like with Ilawi, and the fact that he became like besties with Yasuo, like they found things in common. Like what? It was extremely wholesome, and the fact that Ari could see right through him. It's like, I know that there's more to you than what you think, and he's just like ... It's just it was just so good.
That was fun, and I remember too. Just naturally things happen in development sometimes where like we were not going to show his face. Like I didn't know what was under the mask.
Yeah,
and sometimes
right,
I like not knowing. It's cool. Like I don't want to know. It's mysterious.
Yeah.
And then one of our animators had him like pull the mask off and spit in one of the moves.
The spit. Oh,
Yeah,
and
I
I
know
was
there's
like-
two people who were very happy about that decision.
That's how I
Dude,
And I was
defeated
like,
Viego.
do you guys ever show it on the map? Because this is awesome, and now we kind of need
Yeah.
to use it.
Yeah. That's how
And
Necrit
everyone
beat
was
the
like,
game,
cool.
dude.
that was nice.
I actually defeated Viego by spitting on him. I made sure.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That actually
That's
happened.
amazing.
Iconic.
Yeah, and then we're like, he's got to have something like different under there to hide, and then we played with like the sharpened teeth, so he's kind of like a shark, like underwater predator. And
Chef's kiss.
yeah, it's weird. All that came from an animation that was like, you took his mask off? We're not supposed to see his face. And then it's like, wait, but what if we do? That'd be awesome.
I mean,
That
there were so
was
many
insane.
things like that where, and that's like the fun of playing in blank canvas because, we trust Airship with, awesome art and like the awesome storytelling. And there's things where we haven't had time to think about it as well. And then Airship would pitch us. Like my favorite MoGraph from the whole game is still where Pike cuts his hand and summons the like massive
Yes,
sea
that
monster.
scene.
And then
Oh.
everyone's like, let's go, we're all jumping in, and then they all jump in, and then Brom is just there like, oh my god, and then Brom jumps in. Like Joe showed me the idea for that, and I remember your question was, can Pike even do that? And we're like, he can now, because this is awesome. There's like the number of things. Yeah, this is the rule of cool, and it fits thematically, and there were so many things like that where the Airship team would like pitch us on really cool evolutions to the characters.
I was worried about that same, like, what is he, like Aquaman or something? He's got
Yeah,
jawfish powers, like, jawfish.
Does a
but
dolphin
yeah.
call?
Yeah,
I couldn't
And
help
the, like-
myself from making the joke when one of the meanwhile things come up in my playthrough. I was like, meanwhile, at the halls of justice.
It was cool, though. It felt supernatural and dark,
Yeah.
and, like, it was kind of funny. Some of the characters reacted to
And
it.
each
so.
of those things, like, Airship might not have realized sometimes they were pitching us. Like, I don't even know if you guys knew about the jawfish or, like, the history there, which is why those things really strike a nerve with me, because, like, oh, that actually does make sense for Pike, and it connects into his character, and it's super badass. And then Brom is, like, the only one that looks happy about actually jumping in the mouth. Everyone else looks like thinking emoji, and only Brom is like, yeah, let's go.
That's something
Yeah.
that totally took me, like, I did not expect that. I remember him just like, oh, I have an idea. And,
Yeah, he's
and
like,
I'm
"I've got
just
an
sitting
idea."
there and I'm like, what are you gonna do? And then he cuts his hand and then the blood drips. And then a freaking monster truck thing comes out of the water. And I'm just sitting there like, are they really gonna do this? Are we doing this? And then they all jump and they arrive there. And I was just like, wow.
Yeah, the
Pike is
visual reference
Rutar's
to like
best
that iconic
Uber. Like,
that
what is
promo art
this?
of Pike where he's like falling into the mouth of the jawfish, like that little callback. That was just such a lovely little thing for the lore nerds.
Yes.
Yeah, there was that, and it's cool that you also see, like, the Buru have, like, serpent collars that can, to a certain extent,
Oh yeah.
keep monsters away with their mystical, power and ancient horns and stuff. But Pike lives in the deep, and he can do it with his own like means, And I like that there's some mystery to it. We don't really explain it too much, and it leaves it open for like wherever Riot wants to take that going forward. But yeah, it definitely he surprised me. I early on was excited about him, but also like, man, he's just like a serial killer basically. The list is just,
So,
there has to be more.
So
hello?
did you actually? So super quickly, did Airship then have its own? I don't want to say team. Did you guys have like your own research into the lore? Because when it comes to the lore details in this game, it is insane. It's on such a level that there is no way you guys didn't have an intern from Riot that would actually like give you the details. So did you research all of that yourselves?
No, I mean the early on stuff. All of our notes was like, it was messy, and then Rowan and Laura over there, one of their in-house narrative, I'm not sure if her title, Rowan, correct me, but she was instrumental, and a bunch of writers within Riot were excited to help out on the game, and we checked everything. It was like, hey, does this make sense? Like, and sometimes they would have a better idea, like, no, but you could do this, and we're like, ooh, that actually fixes this other thing. And there was like all this synergy that happened for months and months. And, like we said, the script went through several, even when we thought we had the great script, it was like, oh, people can't figure out who the bad guy is here, and it's not clear why Alawi, why is MF such a jerk? Nobody likes her. She's unlikable. And like all throughout the process, we just were, pushing and pulling things and getting ideas from Forge. And I will say Laura was like a godsend over there. She just has so much in-depth knowledge and understanding of how things work in a story and why. And internally, our writer Frank, that had to wrangle all this stuff every time we made these sweeping changes. It was definitely a team effort. I can't. Our writer list is quite long. If you watch the credits, like there's a lot of help from Riot.
Also, Rowan made an entire tweet about that, which I've shared. And another thing is, first of all, I didn't expect it to have so many notes. I didn't expect that I'll be doing so much reading. I was like literally writing notes and like doing my homework while reading and going through every single one of them.
To be fair, neither did we. But so I mean, the short answer, like Necrit, to your question is, like Joe said, yes, he had a secret research lore team in pocket, which was Riot Forge, but also the amazing people that like we lean on, within Riot internally. So I remember initially we had the idea for the lore journals, like, you guys were saying we could like hide stuff around the game. So myself and Laura, who's the narrative editor over on Riot Forge, she's our senior narrative editor, we put out a call into Riot and said, hey, is anyone maybe interested in, like we want some really lore accurate, like, Easter eggs and tidbits and stuff that we can like help to weave and connect the world together. And then we got over 100 like responses from the writers and the narrative team scattered across Riot, and this is like in 2019. This is even before coronavirus. And so when we got all of that, I was like, well, I'm not wasting any of this. We have to figure out how to get all of it in the game. And then like over at Airship, like Steve was just like a machine. He's like, okay, well, we're gonna hide these here and these go here, and then something that the writers did a great job of is tried to match them to the area you were in as well. Like sometimes they related to the dungeon you were in or the part of the game you were up to, and they just painted like a little bit of extra color on the side. They ended up being a lot bigger thing than I think we intended.
We actually got so many. We didn't even use all of them. We have a ton of extras. Like there was a lot. We were like, holy cow.
I mean, if you say that, Joe, we're going to be on Twitter having to post them next.
Yeah, yeah, you are.
I think we
Laura's going to have, just when Laura thought she was done editing 107, Joe, she's going to have to go and do another 16 or something.
I made it like my life mission to hunt for these notes. Like I would stay and I would look for them, and I don't care if I'll have to go to a resting point and then fight through all the monsters again just to get to them. Because after I realized that some of these actually connect to other champions that are not even related to what's going on, but they're somehow connected to the story, and you can learn about a lot more that is going on in Runeterra in general, and not just in the game. Like for example, when we were on the Wind Isles, I think the Wind Island?
Windrake Isle.
Windrake.
Yeah. The moment I read the Tom Kench note.
Oh yeah.
Oh my
Joe,
God.
do you want to tell them?
Yeah, I mean, originally he was on our short list of like the villain cast for.
He was going to be in the game.
He was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And he's dark as hell. And I thought, I mean, a lot of his lore is involves like, oh, I lost the bet, I have to eat parts of myself or whatever, like crazy.
Right.
And he was probably a little too, as we focused the story more and more, it felt more like he wasn't going to be tied to the central story, but maybe he could be off to the side. And it was just one of those painful things where we realized, in order to do other things, like we had to let him go. And also we made a conscious effort that if we were using a champ, we had to like do them justice. And so otherwise they just get like a mention. I think there's actually a theme song in the inn, like the tavern music has its own little separate soundtrack there, and one of them is like a reference to the devil with two coats or whatever. I forgot what It's pretty cool. So like, there's a few mentions, but yeah, we love him here. We're like, we gotta have Tom Kench. We're gonna have him, right? And it's like, I don't think we are anymore.
I want to plus one Joe's comment there of like, when we put a champion in, we just wanted to do them justice. So like Joe said, it got really hard at the end there when we were boiling the cast down. Tom Kench is on the list, Yorick and Callista are on the list. Like, it starts to get really tough. And so, see, like, your reaction, Dinka, we had to make a choice between like Yorick and Maokai. So Tom Kench is like down below that even. Like, he's like 4th or 5th. And it comes down to just, we only have so much time and so much space, and we just like have to choose. And there's maybe a version where like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but we could like, okay, we could do like a shallower version of Maokai, and we might have been able to squeeze Yorick in. But now, instead of having a great execution of one champion, we have a mediocre execution of 2 champions, and now no one's happy. So we were like, well, let's just crush the one that we're going to do. And then, unfortunately, the realities of game development.
I have a small suggestion. It's just that when I was playing, when I got to the Shadow Isles and like squeaked and screamed and cried and heaved, I saw the burial grounds, the cemetery.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my god, I'm gonna see Yorick. And
That's
I
fair.
did everything just to get myself in there. And I'm fighting and I'm going through everything and I'm just like, where is he? Where's my boy? And then I reach and I get the little dancing the Viego's statue, and I'm like, I was devastated. Because like I thought maybe even just like the what do you call it? Yeah, the shovel, like a little statue of the maiden, anything to remind us that
we'll
like
have an offline conversation.
There
about
is.
It.
I
We'll have an
haven't tried
off-the-record
out.
conversation about it, because
But
Yorick was definitely on the list for a little bit.
he was on the list, but yeah, that is fair though. That like, particularly, and we didn't think of that while we were going through. The graveyard feels like a bit of a bait and switch in particular. So it might have been better to not theme one of them as a graveyard possibly. But it's also a conversation for you guys, like like Skyan, how much is enough when we do Forge games to really feel like we do justice to the champion. With Maokai, we didn't want to just do a fire and forget boss fight. He's integrally woven into the story. He has his own cutscene where he ultis the wall. Like, could we have done less than that and people might have still been happy, or would people have been disappointed?
I mean,
the
that's
Maokai
an
bit was
impossible. It's an impossible line to walk. Which I mean, I've also worked like making comics and stuff. It's always impossible to make those choices. I will say, like, Yorick for me also is a painful cut because, like, and this is something like among the lore community, he has always been the guy who was connected to the Ruin King, like the guy who was at least in my reading of the story, was set up as the rival, as it were, to the Ruin King. Like, he's the humble gravedigger. The king is like, there's this Yorick versus Hamlet kind of dynamic going on there, and I like to see him get as little love as he has in like the Ruination event and even in Ruin King. Like, it was painful, but I am very appreciative that Maokai got his day in the sun, as it were. Like, literally, in fact, by restoring the throne. I was very appreciative of that. Was very happy. Like, I literally shouted, "My boy!" when I saw him. Although
Also,
I will
Joe,
echo the
you gave a
criticism
tree abs. How did you give a tree abs? He's ripped. He's like wooden. His literal washboard abs. They're actually washboard.
That was Hitchum. Yeah. I will say there was an art related reason too, because we had a concern as we developed the Shadow Isles that everything was green. It was like dark, green, and foggy, and you spent hours and hours here. And we're like, if we do Maokai and Maokai's Grove, we can have like trees where he's managed to keep part of the island pretty safe, and then that explains, like where Ari was hanging out. And we originally were going to have a lot more like lush foliage and stuff in like one part of the island. And that was kind of like what triggered it for us. It was like, dude, we need like a visual rest. And Maokai's awesome anyway. And like all those reasons together sort of like cemented him But I agree. Like Yorick has a very clear reason for opposing the Ruined King, and like he's, that's like his thing. So it made a lot of sense, but I honestly can't even remember all of the reasons. But I know like a visual reason was definitely one of them. It was like, we need something else on this island besides broken rocks and green light. And so, Maokai's Grove and all the trees and stuff added like a whole other element that we liked.
I have to say, I am glad that you mentioned Yorick and Kalista, and you mentioned how they didn't make it into the game. And I have to say, I'm still glad that, at the very least, we got journals mentioning them. Like, I don't know if you know that, but there is actually a little story talking about Yorick and how he joined the monks. And when it comes to Kalista, this might be a spoiler if you haven't like 100% the game, but you do get to fight Ledros, and that's really cool. Right. And that boss fight is amazing. So I'm happy that even though you were forced into cutting some champions out, you still try to give them the honor of like making it into the game through journals and stuff. And there is one champion which like there are people who are gonna be like, how did that guy not make it in, even though he's not really the popular one. Do you have like any background behind maybe thinking about Karthus making it into the game?
Ooh.
I don't know if we talked about that like
we talked about him on our side. He was definitely lower down the list though compared to like Maokai, Yorick, Kalista. I mean, honestly, TF and Graves were higher up than Karthus.
It
he was
sense.
like,
he's not like that much of an important character, so I just know that there is a community who really like care about Karthus. So yeah.
But to your point, Necrit, if it's always just the next one down, because if we get to here, it'll be the one that's here. And if we did that one, it'd be the next one.
We have to get this Necrit story character in, so we have to like cut a bunch of other guys.
I'm sorry. I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Don't say that.
Don't say that.
I'm just kidding. That is definitely not true. But, I think Peccarin was another one. Peccarin was...
The whole community is going to descend on his Twitter. No.
Yeah.
No, I was extremely delighted. I was extremely delighted when I saw Necrit, because I was just like, oh my god, this is happening. And like the fact that I'm like he's like telling us stuff that we need to do. Also, it was Viego's voice.
Necrit literally shows up and does a lore video about Viego in the middle
of
the game. I thought it was so cool.
So the original idea was initially I suggested we should do an item. I was like, hey, let's do an item and that we can do a throwback to. And then one of the producers at the time was like, what if we like just made him like a whole NPC? I'm like, well, if we do that, he has to like teach lore to the party, and he's gonna have to teach everyone like what's going on. And we're like, okay, well, how can we like do that? And yeah, so it's lore guardian Necrit.
I legitimately thought there would be like a hat on a table, and that would be it. Because I knew
we didn't tell you.
I had to sign a paper. I had to sign a paper.
Yeah, we made you sign a thing in like early 2019, and then just didn't tell you anything for like 2.5 years.
So I was like, there's gonna be an Easter egg. You go into a bar, there's gonna be like a dead skeleton on the Shadow House and like a hat next to him, and that's gonna be that.
Nope.
Well, I was mistaken.
That would have been easier.
It would have been easier, yeah, it would have.
I have a question. Like, I want to address the big elephant in the room, which is
There's so many elephants. Okay.
Thresh. Now, the thing is that Thresh was introduced to us in the game as Viego's advisor. Eventually, like, he became kind of like his advisor, and like, he had whispered sweet nothings to him and respected him only the way that he wanted to be treated. But the thing is that it was Peccarin's thing, like from the very beginning. Like, Peccarin was the one who kind of pushed him towards like the violence and everything, because that's his thing. Peccarin literally gets off on it, so like he pushed him into doing that so he could get away with it. So what made you decide to go with Thresh instead of Peccarin when Thresh was already established, like his design and everything was already established so long ago, as this just like dude who's like down there, and his thing is dungeons, and he just wants souls, and he's not looking to become like a massive evil mastermind who will play and fiddle with people's brains to achieve some grandiose outcome. So yeah, because that was Hecarim's thing. So what made you choose that?
I mean, Rowan may have his own recollection, but I know for a fact, Thresh, just based on his popularity and like when you think of the Shadow Isles, he's just immediately one of the guys, and he's pretty. He just made
Sorry,
a lot
Joe,
of.
I will interject. We definitely don't choose based on popularity, as proven with our leading, some of the characters that we have in the party. I just want to.
Yeah, popularity is not the right word, but he's definitely a well-known villain of the Shadow Isles, and so, and there were parts of the game where people were like, why is Thresh a bad guy? Like, what's he doing? And like, I think introducing other villains into it would make it even more complicated. We kind of had to sell Thresh as the big bad for a while until the Ruined King shows up. So for a while it's like Gangplank, and then it's like, oh, Thresh is actually the big bad, and then it's like, oh, he's awakening the Ruined King. I think. Do we ever say like in the flashback cutscene we made it very vague, like who the characters were that he sent out to scout the islands for a cure?
Yeah, but we heavily insinuate that it's Callista because it is actually Callista, but we don't specifically call her out by name.
Because if you think about the lore thing, it would make a lot more sense for Gangplank and Hecarim to work together. Because Hecarim already backstabbed Callista in the past, and he would probably want to control the Ruined King because he had done that before, and also because both him and Gangplank have this thing of being the leaders of their own packs per se.
Yeah.
So
I have my two vectors that I was considering. One is what Joe's bringing up, which is the simplicity of Thresh as a villain. We have 3 villains, and 2 of them are very nuanced positions. Gangplank and Viego are very complex villains emotionally. What GP is dealing with, come to figure out his relationship with Alawi, with Bilgewater, and Viego is going through this reanimation process and remembering his wife. Those are very complex, nuanced villains. Thresh is easy. He's a bad guy. He wants souls. It's kind of convenient and helpful, in my opinion, to have something that's a little easier or palatable to balance against those more complex villains in the trio of them. And then the other point to what you're saying, Dinka, Hecarim kind of doesn't come alone. Hecarim is a package deal. He comes with Callista. So if we did Hecarim, then we have to do Callista as well. And now it's become a bigger thing than just one villain. So now we need to get Callista in there. And if we go that far, we probably do need Yorick. And it starts to balloon, and so Thresh was conveniently simple as a villain, at least from my point of view, but also what Joe's talking about, as an antagonist. Those are at least the things that I considered, where, as doing it apples to apples of Hecarim to Thresh.
Okay. That makes
I
sense.
liked Thresh as the Skeletor. We have these 2 King Richard IIIs, and then Skeletor going, ruination across the world.
Then he punches the mirror as he goes back through it.
I hate how accurate that comparison is, but yes, that was.
He's like Skeletor, yeah.
We kind of need a dude with a very simple focus, just to bridge the gap between everybody else.
I know we've talked about almost all the characters, but I want to make sure we talk about our 2 leading ladies at the front. I am personally so proud of the 2, queens that we have leading this game up front, Ilawi and MF. The interaction, the relationship. They're friends, and then they're not, and then they add it's. I really appreciate what Joe and the team were able to get that the richness and the nuance out of them, and no one ever questions that they should be the there was a time where maybe Theo for Graves was a thing we consider, but no, it's Joe loved Ilawi immediately, design and visually, and I think Joe, the more you learned about her story, oh wait, this is really cool, it's about motion and forward movement, and I mean I'm really proud that we got them up front, Joe.
Yeah, she, like I said, she was just awesome, and then her connection to MF and to Gangplank and everything just immediately cemented. Because there were other Like Graves was definitely on the list. And he was a package deal as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, like that all was like, and to be honest, we did think like, hey, this feels fresh and different. There is like, you know, like the strongest characters are women leading this team, and it just, their relationships felt natural. It didn't feel forced in any way, and it just got us excited. And yeah, at the end of the day, that's kind of what the main thing, you know, like the rule of cool, whatever. It's like, are we excited to work on this? And you know, when we finally had the final list narrowed down, it was like, you know, it just felt good.
I think the biggest thing that you did with these two is you completely shattered the stereotype that was kind of like put on both of them. So like if Misfortune was just this like, you know, like really hot chick that just like, you know, flirts with everyone and like does whatever she wants, in the game she was portrayed like more of a leader and someone who's really passionate about what she's doing, and at the same time, as though she is extremely stubborn, eventually she understands like the bigger picture and is willing to go and do something that is out of her comfort zone or something that she's used to, because she's always doing what she wants because she is the queen of Bilgewater. And with Illaoi, she has always been portrayed as this like really strong, like, you know, woman who does whatever she wants as well. You know, she always goes with the flow because that is the way of the Naga Keboros. And throughout the game, I didn't expect to see her question her way or like question her religion, because up until now it was all about that. So that was such a shocking reveal that she can actually feel that and try and figure out why things are the way that they are, and basically her whole story is trying to understand the truth behind it. I especially like that with Gangplank, which I would also want to talk about. The fact that she had a relationship with him and she had done what she had thought was the right thing to do. Eventually, she understood what she had done wrong and called him out on his bullshit. Like, I was sitting there cheering up for her because my girl, like, I was afraid that she would just like give in because he was just like, I need you. And I was just like, no, don't do this. Don't fall for him. I know he's hot as hell and he's looking great, but don't do
It
this.
doesn't draw people who aren't hot. They're just all hot, like, and
They're
like ripped
just, it's
and
just, oh my god.
Hey, wait, did you see the collector's edition print? Because that was like,
Yes! I actually laughed.
I love the intimacy of it. I love how quiet it is.
Yes.
Because like that dynamic of like you have these two brick shithouse characters. It would be so easy to play that for comedy or to play that excited, but like just Joe, like that artwork, mwah, absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely gorgeous. I love
That
the
was one
tenderness.
of my
I love the
favorites.
quiet between the two characters.
Joe,
I
did
couldn't
we
stop
put
like
the
side staring when Sky and shared that picture and everybody started like shipping them, and I was just like, oh, you haven't played the game.
Yeah, you
oh,
haven't played the
have you
game.
now?
Joe, do you have the did we release the alternate version of that on social somewhere? Because you remember you did two versions and we picked that one that eventually shipped, but do we have the other one?
I don't know if it made
Is
it
it
in the
in the
upload. I'll probably share it soon. I don't think it's
Okay.
in the upload.
Can
There
you
was
describe it for the stream. Describe it
yeah,
for everybody.
I loved the idea that like at one time before Gangplank was the Reaver King and he lived among the Buru and he was in love with Illaoi and they had this thing and they were younger and she wasn't the Kraken priestess, and so there's one where he's sitting there like all content and she's like braiding his hair like behind. And it was such a girly thing that to me I loved. Like a lot of people's reaction was like, Illaoi would never do that. How? But it's like, yes, but that's the point. This is before she became who
It's
she
not
was.
a
and
girly thing,
or
it's
he
an
became who he
intimate
was.
thing.
Yeah.
But in the end, like just lying in the grass was like what what won the everyone.
And holding an orange at the same time, right? You got to
I
hold
put
an
the orange in there.
Unpeeled
I put the orange in there. I'm like, I never got
the.
the orange thing. I'm like, he's gonna have an orange, just like.
Yeah. I remember you sent that, and we all looked at it. We're like, yeah, okay, we go with that. Yeah, he's just holding an orange.
It's my favorite. I do like action stuff and whatever. I almost never get to do like little intimate scenes like that. So that was one of the other reasons I wanted to do something like surprising. That was like, oh, and it also, again, like it's not something that's in the story. It like gives you added like context from like way before, and it's like whenever you can introduce more to the story, like from before or after. Than what you've like already experienced. I didn't want to draw a scene that you can play in the game, basically. So that was all the thinking behind that. But anyway, I knew you would love it because, it sort of shows a little more of that relationship that they talk about.
Extremely wholesome. I think another thing about Gangplank is the fact that we know him as this like unhinged mother fudger. He is like he literally would
Rubbing on people's bones.
Yeah, exactly. He would like go into people's bones, and he would wait for them to wake up so he could continue. Like that's how he rolls. So throughout the story, that's all I was thinking about, and seeing the way that he was interacting with Ilawi. I was just like, who is this man? What happened?
She can beat him down whenever, like, she's like bigger than him. She can crush him.
It was such a beautiful moment. Like he really showed the vulnerability, and like the way that she was just like, I'm gonna talk to him, and she just goes and she talks to him kind of like a toddler. Like she treats him like a child. Like, you are so stupid. Like, I can't believe you had done that. Look at what you have done.
So credit to the performances, and I think like all of the voice performances of the game are just amazing.
Those are
That
amazing.
conversation you're talking about, I feel a little bit of as Alawi's talking to GP, she's kind of berating herself at the same time, because she's like, how did I ever go for this guy?
Yes.
Like, and she's like, and it's really convincing when she's every time I hear her like dissing Gangplank, I feel her critical of herself at the same time.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Which is very much her character, is like that like the outwardly truth bearer, but then at the same time also constantly looking over her own shoulder, which I thought was very cool about Ilawi. Because again, and this is something I wanted to bring up just as a point of compliment, I love that we got so much Buru philosophy, that we got like all these texts and all this like expounding on the whole like being in motion and what that means to these people. And to see Ilawi react very negatively to like things caught in amber, or little statues that sort of play out the same action over and over again, because that's anathema to her religion. And that as a contrast to Viego, who's so explicitly trying to hold on to the past. Like, completely unwilling to change, completely unwilling. Like, the contrast between Ilawi as, like, a primary protagonist and then Viego as a villain, thematically, that's just really good.
I think the way that Ilawi and Braum fixed Yasuo, I think if you put them with Viego in a room for like an hour, they could fix him.
Could fix him?
Yes.
Dinka, you can't fix him.
Yes, you can!
Yeah.
Dinka's trying really hard. Hang on, Dinka, is this just a suggestion or is this a suggestion? Like, you guys should fix Viego. Here's how you do it. Just put him in a room with you.
Yes. No, the thing is with
Dr.
Viego,
Braum
though,
will heal all the problems.
The thing with Viego is that I like the way that he wasn't as desperate in the game, like he was, like he's in League of Legends, and the way that he's portrayed there, and the way that he talks and speaks. Like, he had a lot more vocabulary than Isolde, I feel like there was just like more to what was going on with him and Isolde. Like, we've seen at first that they were happy when it was with the in Necrit's scene, when Necrit was talking about that. So he showed them very happy, right? So Necrit's POV is that they were happy, but then when we're going deeper into Viego's memories, he is an absolute piece of shit. He's treating her like trash. So the question is that like how, like, was there happiness between them before, and then negatives, or was it just always an absolute nightmare because he is a spoiled brat?
I don't think it's that second one. I think it's a the long answer is relationships can be nuanced and difficult,
Right.
and I don't think it's clear cut like either version. For Necrit's POV being that it was all sunshine and rainbows, or Necrit's version where Viego's version where Ari pulls out the memory of it being
Right.
a little more unhealthy. I think relationships in the real world just aren't black and white. Maybe they are in comic books, in
Yeah,
times.
I'm asking that because a lot of people have.
I saw a lot of the chatter.
100% set on the fact that Viego has always been the way that he was, and he was an immature 22-year-old, and was forced into the position of being a king. So obviously you would think that, but then at the same time you can't really. Also, with Gwen, when they were teasing Gwen and you saw them together, so you've seen Gwen's point of view. So I always wondered, is there more to it? Because there has to, because it can't be a romantic story if everything has always been dark and this was just abused from day
You're absolutely
one.
right. Yeah,
Okay.
and that's where I saw a lot of the chatter. People was he abusive for the whole relationship?
Right.
To your point, that can't have been the truth. And I think we want things to just be really clear cut of it's 100% this or 100% that, and the reality is, for
I will say, personally, that was an instance where I think we dialed back, because I did want to show the absolute worst aspects of him and show something bad, something where she would stab him in his heart in the opening sequence of the game, and maybe it wasn't always that way, but there was these times, and I think I think that there's certain things that are better left to people's interpretation, and maybe it will just make a character too unlikable, or unredeemable, or whatever it is. You can hang on to your fantasy of no, he was this way, and I think that was one of those cases where we just felt like it was better to dial back, and it made sense, because I don't know, I can go pretty dark. Ask Rowan. I'm always no, let's show this. Let's push it. Let's have him blow his face off. Yeah.
Like Dinka said early on, the dark, and you call it dark. I was thinking more, it's just treating it with the seriousness and respect, and it comes off as it's a dark, serious story.
It has weight. It's more about weight.
Yeah, it's got gravitas.
Yeah.
So at this point, I think it's a good time to actually just open the crate and let out the biggest elephant in the room. The absolute
There's so many elephants. There's so many elephants.
No, there's just one really big one, and which has the tattoo on it which says Ruination. So, when the event came out, and it wasn't received that well, did you guys get nervous? What were your feelings when you saw that the Ruination wasn't doing that well as the main connection to the game?
So, I'll give some backstory for players that maybe don't understand as much timelines. Something that we haven't explicitly said, but it's probably worth saying. We didn't make any changes to the game as a result of the Sentinels of Light event, because that's actually just not possible with timelines. The decision to delay the game, like Joe was saying, was made in December in 2020. The event didn't even start until June this year. So, we chose to delay the game long before the Sentinels of Light event even started. So, just want to clear up that one that I've seen floating around a bit. Did you delay the game because of Sentinels of Light? No, the game was delayed 8 months before the event even started.
Let's go with that, actually. That makes sense.
And then being able to pivot or make changes as a result of a thing that is happening around June and July for a game that is shipping in November, just not possible. The game was basically done at that point anyway. So we're just not able to pivot on that. But to Necrit's question of were we nervous or not? Personally, no. Because we knew that we chose a tone, and to Joe's point, it's a darker, serious tone. and a lot of the feedback and a lot of the like opinion that I saw from the three of you and the community of like wanting something which was more treating it seriously and really getting into the nuance of the characters. While we're reading all of your guys' posts and watching your videos, we're over here playing our game, like, check that, check this, check that, check this, and like, this might be okay. Like, I think we have something, which is the thing that it sounds like everyone really wanted.
I think
At least
around
was
that
my
time,
opinion.
I think around that time you were also commenting a lot on your Twitter, and I was talking to you privately as well about this, and I just couldn't wait for the Ruin King game to come out because I knew how much work you have put into it and how much research you have put into it as well, and that's really truly what I cared about. I've never really played turn-based games. Like, the only time I played that was like when I used to play Final Fantasy somewhere in like 5th grade. So for me, I didn't even think of the game as much as I thought of the plot. The game in itself shocked me because I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did.
We definitely need to give props to Airship for that, because I think
Yes,
the
like, mad
JRPGs
props
that
for you
like
guys.
the way you guys make it to Joe, take that back to like Steve and to the team, that people were just playing the story and feeling the narrative and story, even though they maybe didn't realize they were playing a super deep, turn-based RPG.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, our team is awesome, and I have played so many damn turn-based RPGs, and it's like everyone wants to add a little wrinkle into the system. And it's like everything's been done at this point. What else can you do? And Steve and the guys just blah blah blah. And we're like,
Genius. That was such a genius thing to do, because a lot of the people who I spoke to and I told them about the Ruin game, they were like, wait, but that's like an RPG, so like, and I was just like, wait, but you've got lanes, so you actually decide when do you want to attack. And they're like, oh, well, that's more interesting. And that part is what got them into it.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Good job, Steve. Good job, team.
I have to say, I started my second playthrough. I started playing on Heroic, and it's such a totally different game. It's so like now you are kind of forced into like embracing the RPG elements, and it all clicks together. Like, you have to pay attention to the enchants, you have to pay attention to what you equip, and suddenly the game, I almost want to recommend it to people to play it on Heroic, because like that's how you're supposed to play an RPG, and it's so good.
Oh yeah.
Here's an example of like things that you were asking earlier for an example of like before and after we delayed the game, of things that like appeared. Taunt didn't exist until March this year.
My
Like
chunky
the design team over at Airship, like the taunt mechanic, I think really changed the dynamic of how
That was literally my bread and butter. That's what I used,
Right.
and that's what I started every battle from.
I relied on my Braum, which I gave as much stamina as possible, and I think my Braum at the end had like 35,000 health. That was more than the bosses, which was pretty hilarious build.
He's a tanky boy.
Very chunky boy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny saying that Heroic is really the way the game's meant to be played, because really, we always call the hardest mode like Steve mode. He makes that first, and then it's like impossible, and we have to like dial it back for normal humans. But I do think that a lot of the systems and stuff, factor into that Heroic mode. So it's not just like something cranked up to impossible difficulty. It's actually balanced really well, and like you said, it forces you to use the lanes and all the systems like masterfully. Otherwise, you can like cruise through it a little more casually if you want. We have story mode if you really don't want to fight anything,
or if you're getting dunked by Ruin Yasuo and you just want to watch the ending.
Oh, the Yasuo crit.
Yeah, that's the other thing to bring up. Like, I really like that there was difficulty modes, because there were times when it's like, okay, I forgot a thing in this goddamn dungeon, I need to go back and get it. Yeah. Story mode, just blaze through the battle, so I don't have to do all the random encounters. I really appreciate the inclusion of a story mode for people who might not be so much into like heavy RPG battle mechanics. Like that's a really nice thing for accessibility.
Yeah. For sure.
Another thing about that story mode is the fact that, well, first of all, I didn't really know, like, how much of a story mode it is, because every game has its own version of a story mode. So for example, if I bring in Hades, the story mode didn't really help anything. Like it was just like it was still the same difficulty pretty much, just like less monsters. So I was worried that all it's gonna do is just reduce the health of like the bosses, and I'll still have to go through the whole shebang. But my comment section, my chat, while I was streaming it, they actually pointed out that after a certain amount of losses, I can actually just hop into the story mode and skip it. I wish I could know that before that. There's a lot of small little nuances in the game that I think needs tweaking in that aspect. But the fact that I actually had that option, and it just like completely calmed my nerves, and I could just again focus on the story. That was like a really great addition.
I think that's another example. I think story mode also in its current iteration also was added like after the delay. I don't think we had that in there before. So
It was.
There's a lot.
I remember the philosophy of it was, what if someone really wants to come and like just play our storybook, but doesn't want to play the RPG part of the game? That was like the genesis of the
Super
mode.
quickly though, I don't actually know what story mode does. Can you explain that to me? I have not turned it on. I actually don't know what it does.
So I'll tell you.
Yeah, go
go ahead.
In story mode, basically, you have an option that in the middle of a fight, you know how you can flee? I don't think you've ever done that. But you have this button called F, and you just press it, and you can flee. And there is this part where you just can tab out, and it would tell you skip battle. So you can just literally skip the battles
skip
entirely
bosses.
and just
Alright.
skip bosses. And
you still get loot and experiences
That's
if
a
you want.
shame. That's the best part about the game. I love the bosses.
I know. It's not for everybody.
You get critted by Yasuo like twice because there's a bug.
I
and
legitimately slammed my head into the table when I finally got to phase 2, and 3 ruined champions jumped out during the Viego fight. I just lost it.
While we're talking about the bosses, I definitely want to give props to like Steve and the design team. I think the lane system really shines on the bosses in particular.
Yeah.
Like I can't remember if it was Skyen or Dinko mentioning like the bosses standing out. There's like a unique gimmick or a mechanic on almost every boss, which is like, you know, like I love the box for Thresh, where it's like get in the box.
Yes.
No, literally get in the box, like on the bar. And you know, for Viego at the end, where you're trying to like, you have to fight him in the mist, and there's like mist. There's like and so you're chasing him through the mist on the bar. Like, I really think those boss fights like did a great job of showcasing
Like
the lane system.
I'm a big MMO guy where you team up and you fight bosses that have like widely different mechanics, and so like in this game I did actually feel that like every single boss was different, because there was also the boss where you had to kill the followers to damage them, and there was the boss who like actually summoned its own heart and you had to target the heart, and I truly believe this is where the gameplay really shines of this game. The bosses, every single boss had a different mechanic, and it suddenly, the game that you knew, it now suddenly played differently, and this was such a strong point in the gameplay.
Oh, speaking of bosses, the avatar of the Nagakeboro.
Oh, that was
She's
so good.
Snatched.
That was
Okay,
so
first of all,
good.
she's hella snatched. But like at first when I saw her, it took me a moment because I had to reread Avatar of the Nagakeboros and like understand that that's not actually the Nagakeboros. It's just an avatar.
Yep.
Right.
If we saw, it's like I think it's a little Lovecraftian from my point of view. If we tried to behold the actual Nagakaburos, our mortal minds would melt into a puddle. So the best we can do is we can behold the avatar of her gloriousness, and then battle that.
Eyes would blink differently.
Oh yeah, it was like a physical
such
mask
a nice
that actually
touch.
blinked. That was so good.
Yes.
Yeah, she turned out awesome. Like Rowan said, we did not want to like try to go there and show like what Alawi's god looks like. It's best left up to like mystery, and she took this form just to beat you down in the battle, but and test the champs. But you know, like what she really looks like remains a mystery,
Okay.
which may never be solved.
Well, she is called the Kraken and the Bearded Lady.
Bearded Lady,
so
yeah.
we can mix that all together and.
And I'll be honest, like there is some concept art floating around from way back in the day, like in League, and like different, like what what
Yeah,
she
yeah.
may look like, and I'm always like, what? That's not what I imagined. And I think every person will be like, no, that's not like, it's more Cthulhu-esque or
Yeah,
more
yeah,
tentacles,
exactly.
less
I think we're
tentacles.
all like thinking
And
about
it's like, no,
Cthulhu's
like,
creature.
I don't want to be the
Lovecraftian.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to be
It's
the one that,
Lovecraftian.
yeah.
Actually, speaking of art style, specifically for Joe, like there was a lot of like adaptation from the League of Legends house style into like specifically like your style and Airship Syndicate's house style with some of the characters. Could you speak to like the process of adapting, for example, a character like Thresh, where there are like, I presume it's censorship concerns where he has to be changed out of being explicitly skeletal for particular markets, and then filtering that through your style, because like especially with all your years of comic book experience, in terms of how you approach designing a character like that.
Yeah, so Thresh specifically did have some regional constraints, and I mean, this was like even at Riot and League, they were sort of like tweaking his design to not be
Legends of Runeterra in particular.
Yes, exactly. And so we were like, oh, that's good to know. And so we sort of did our take on that, where it was kind of like a metallic mask that still evokes, a skull, but it's not, as skeletal. It's weird, the things that factor in. Sometimes it's stuff like that. Sometimes it's just things work for me. Like there was an existing Captain Fortune design that I found in some folder somewhere, and like I think just like taking her hat off changed the entire vibe of the character. Like she seemed a little more serious, and for me, like I'll be honest, I didn't even want to use Misfortune unless we could take some of the cheese off her from back in the day, where not cheese, but she was definitely like a femme fatale and like,
Yeah.
Yep.
you know what I mean. And I was like, okay, this is a serious story. No one is gonna like buy this. And luckily, they were like, yeah, that's awesome. We want her to be like
I
mean,
love her
taken
outfit.
seriously.
Yeah, that's where
So,
like
yeah.
the stars aligning. We have for the longest time wanted to correct, like, the misfortune that runs around Summoner's Rift is very different from the misfortune that is in lore. And so yeah, when Joe was worried about that, we were like, no, wait, we agree. We also want to like actually have her be accurate to the Captain Fortune,
Yeah.
like the badass.
And Ari was
like,
another one. Ari was like a little, sort of cheesecake along,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word. And I'm like, she's like this ancient, possibly immortal, like psychic vampire. Like she could be awesome if we went a little darker. And like her clothing, like I tried to make her look a little more like, okay, she's traveling, she's escaping with Yasuo, she's gonna have to battle in these clothes. Like
eyebrows.
something a little more form-fitting will probably work better, less like dress and stuff. So like a lot of those, animation is a factor always when you're designing characters. And then it's just like what looks cool. Like in a lineup, when a bunch of them are on the screen together, it's like, oh dang, if Brahm's in the front, his shield blocks everybody. We have to make sure he's always in the back because it's gigantic. And then it's like, oh, Alawi's tentacles are all over the place. What if you summon 5 of them? And so, like all of that stuff comes into play, and I'm like shaving things off the portrait. It's like, oh no, we actually took Brahm's shield off the portrait at one time because when they were talking, it like blocked everybody, and now it's like smaller on his back.
Just broad.
But yeah, like all those things come into play, and I will say though, I didn't really for most of the 6 playable champs. I really liked the like overall. I liked their design, and I didn't want to go and like changing everything. I just kind of like made little aesthetic tweaks here and there. Like Braum is almost exactly like how you know him. I think if you looked at a character and you're like, wait a minute, is this Alawi? That would be weird, So we tried to honor the spirit of the character like the iconic image you have in their head, but with just like a few refinements.
Like Yasuo with sideburns. Like that was such a nice.
That was
touch.
such a cool touch. It was like so
It was
small.
So good.
But
Yes,
so
but
good.
it added so much to him.
Yeah.
So Joe,
And
mission
also,
accomplished.
like that Ari looks a lot less like put together in a way. Like she like.
Yeah,
you
she
know,
looks a
she's
little
got that
feral.
thick- Yeah, exactly. She got like the eyebrows and like
Styan.
she's like yeah.
Feral was one of our like operating keywords for
Yep.
sure. It was like we gave her fangs and like
Mm-hmm.
he is
Fluffy
like
ears.
not human, you know. So it's like that's what makes her cool. So let's push that stuff.
And Joe, most people, I mean, even just now hearing Necrit and Dinka mention Yasuo's sideburns, no one even noticed. We took his pauldron off.
Oh, the thingy.
Yeah,
that he
the
had.
tall like pauldron
Yeah.
he usually
My
has. Like Joe
chat had
took,
to point that out to me.
I
Yeah,
figured that was
didn't
Joe
notice.
at least. Yeah.
No, we've
Joe
noticed
took it
that
off
in the
In the first cinematic, in the,
in the
The
first
first
cinematic,
cinematic,
yeah,
yeah.
we've seen that, and like
Yeah, and I
think it's
love it.
it's
But, like,
amazing.
when I saw that the Spirit Blossom like cinematic, and it's like so huge and badass.
Yeah.
Like I love how it looks, but you know, in our game, like I think I just tried toning it down and making everything like a little more form fitting and not like getting in the way.
right.
And I feel like we're seeing more of like the wandering Ronin Yasuo and not like this armored. There's something a little more like ornate about it, and like he's not an ornate dude. Like, or in the early versions of the script, I think that we had versions where first time you meet him, he's like in a bar, like just
yeah.
wasted out of his mind.
Drunk.
We had like a bounty hunter version where you actually you meet him for the first time when he's on the bounty about to kill like this bunch of guys, and there was like a lot of scenes that like he just seemed scrappy and like he's been living a hard life, so like that armor just didn't really work with that vision of the character, and we did, you know, we made a bunch of tweaks, and the final Yasuo you see is like a little less that, but the decision was already made. It was like we're taking some of this armor off.
Just as a
Even
time
in
check,
Peccarin, damn it.
as a time check, we have 5 minutes left, I think. If we want to do closing comments or final question stuff,
Yes.
Necrit,
Yeah,
feel free to
I'm
throw.
in my pants, so that's awesome. Let's do this.
My biggest answers were really answered. I wanted to talk about the elephants, and the elephants were addressed. I just quickly want to say as my final comment, I am so happy that even though during the Ruination event, Pike was so kind of weird to see there because he kind of like didn't make sense, and now suddenly the Ruined King comes in and we're like, oh, he actually like Ilaoi affected like how he thinks, and now it makes sense why he wouldn't be just an insane murderer. So I want to thank the game for fixing Pike. Thank you.
Yes.
That's awesome. And I will say we debated you know, at first it was like, oh man, can we have that joyful reunion at the last drink before they part ways without the whole group there, right? And it's like MF's not there because she's pissed and she stormed off.
Right.
And it's like, where's Pike? And we thought we can't leave him out, but I think it makes it cooler that you're left wondering like, where did he go? Oh no, did he like lose his way and go psycho again? And then like after the credits, when you get that moment, you're like, oh sweet, he's already on his next mission.
He's in control now.
Yeah, and he's in control. So
I have I have two things I'm gonna make it real quick. First of all, Yasuo and Ari, that ship has sailed literally, and I am absolutely like obsessed with the dynamic and the conversation and the backs and forth that they have between each other. The second thing is Miss Fortune. She managed to fight off Viego when like, you know, they had the like battles of minds. But at the end, she was shown with blue eyes. Like, why?
that was like a late stage
Yeah,
addition, I will say. So you're left questioning, is she being affected by him? Is it just her? Could it be the lighting possibly? Is she really driven to darkness like of her own accord, or is it like she's already being affected by Viego? Who knows? Yeah, we purposely left it like vague to sort of like be able to take the story in either direction. I don't know if Rowan if you want to add more there.
Yeah, there is an indistinct amount of time that we show. I think we posted like a timeline showing exactly where the game fits in the like lore, and there's like a gap there between the end of the game and when would ever be the start of the Sentinels of Light event. So we leave it, enough space there. But to Joe's point, yes, you see her fight off Viego's temptation at the end of the game. And a lot of players were like, well, she clearly like turned him down in the end of the game. Why would she ever take that up later? I was like, yeah, but she had all of her friends there with her in Ruined King. Alawi comes in and puts her hand on her shoulder. She has her support group there to get her to not take the deal. But maybe somewhere between the end of the game and the start of Sentinels of Light, if Alawi's not there to put her hand on her shoulder, if, Braun isn't there to like give her a shoulder to lean on, maybe Sarah Fortune starts to think that she needs the help to take Bilgewater, and so we leave it open to interpretation.
So my final thing is the last elephant, I think, because like there's one that's been hiding under my table, and I'm going to bring it out, which is the question of
elephants.
Yeah, not so much necessarily sequel, but the question of like Riot Forge, Airship Syndicate, continued partnership, maybe? Question mark.
We loved working with Joe and the guys at Airship. Making games takes a long time, so even if we were doing something, it wouldn't, be anytime soon. It would take a long time to work through it. Joe, do you want to?
Yeah, likewise. I think, it's been an awesome experience for us, and Runeterra is a huge place and has many champions that are awesome. And it's definitely something we, as a studio, would be excited to explore in the future. But, we'll just have to wait and see. May the stars align.
Yeah.
Amen.
No one says no. That's good enough for me.
No,
Yeah.
it's definitely not a no. There's lots of, industry concerns there of, what kind of games do we want, 3 to 4 years from now? What does Joe and his team want to do? Maybe they don't want to make, the same kind of game again. They want to do a different kind of game. There's all sorts of, like, things which have nothing at all to do with the actual video game that would come into that. But I would totally work with Joe and the guys again. It was a blast.
For sure. And we've loved the reception to the game. Like, it's there is an excitement when you finally put the game out there and like just sharing things within the team. Like, we use Slack to communicate, and all day it's like, look at this link, look what this person said, look at Dinka's reaction to this moment. And that stuff boosts us. You know what I'm saying? Like if it came out and it would like tanked and just everyone hated what we did, it would be so soul crushing. But I am proud of the game we made, and it's thanks to the team here and Riot Forge that like helped steer the ship, gave us more time when we all knew we needed it, stuff like that. I would say just be patient with your game devs, people. No one delays a game just for no good reason. It's like probably needs it. Just know that. And so, I'm just happy that we made a game that people are happy with. Like I see a lot of people like I didn't ever play League, and I love this game. You don't need to know anything about it. That's music to my ears. But then, like, the hardcore fans are like, oh my god, I found this note that talks about this character. And
this room here, that's the 4 of us here. I'm included in that. I just happen to also be able to make the game, but I'm, like, in the group.
Yeah, it's very hard to satisfy everyone with that stuff. And I wouldn't say, like, we did a perfect job, or everyone. I'm sure you guys have raised good points about, different directions we could have gone, but I do think for the most part, it's like we delivered on the promise, and we're very happy. And every day, like seeing everyone's comments and everything it really is like why we do it and what keeps us sane, I think. When there are delays and everyone's like working real hard and like bugs come up and it's like, oh no, my save got corrupted. I thought we got all this stuff. I mean, just know, like, this place is like a beehive behind the scenes, like getting those patches out and fixing all this stuff. Because, we try our best, but what are you going to do? We miss things sometimes. But, so thank you. Thank you guys for all the support and all the love online and all that. It means a lot.
Thank you to all of the players.
I quickly want to give a shout out to a person whom because like me especially, I have to play the game to like 100%. I just have to do it, even just for the work, but I kind of want to do it because I personally love RPGs, so I would be doing it anyway. But I can feel the success because I want to give a shout out to Skin Spotlights. It's one of the biggest channels when it comes to League, and he actually, I talk to him sometimes, and he actually himself went and just 100% all the journals on his own without like any reason to do that. So there are people who are legitimately looking for all the little details because it is a good game. So we can just feel the success even behind the scenes.
Yeah, I read there was like one write-up recently where it was like listing the pros and cons, and it was like pros, you know, cool combat, whatever. I now have a favorite League character, and cons is like now I'm have to do all this homework and research on all these other.
Well, that's what our
League
YouTube channels are for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Give us the views.
Yes.
Come on.
Yeah. So that's great.
Well, and with that, I think we just about reached the finish line. So in this awesome finish, I really want to thank everyone. I want to thank Rowan, I want to thank Joe, I want to thank TV Sky, and I want to thank Dinka for being here at this awesome roundtable. And with this,
You guys,
yes, go ahead.
thank you guys. You know, like Joe said, thanks to all of the players playing the game. But yeah, thanks for taking the time.
And with that, I think we will just about close this. This was absolutely amazing. The game is just, I think everyone can say it was actually really, really good.
Yeah.
And we hope to see more from you.
Thank you guys.
So
Bye-bye.
thank you, and we'll
Is-
see you